Most financial advice is about whether or not to do Roth conversions, but there's less coverage of exactly when during your life to do conversions. And that timing decision can have a huge impact, possibly changing your outcome by tens of thousands of dollars. You can think of it like those airline pricing charts where you might have wildly different prices depending on exactly when you buy a ticket. So in this video, we're going to go over the 5 key life stages when you might be doing Roth conversions, and we'll highlight some of the strategy for each one. I'm Justin, and I've been helping people with retirement for over 20 years, and we're going to start with your working years because most people say you should never do conversions before you retire, right? After all, you've got earnings during these years. These might be your peak earnings years, and so you might already be in relatively high tax brackets. That can make those conversions less efficient. And if you're really concerned about future RMDs or something, you might be able to do something by just contributing to Roth in your workplace plan, like through Roth 401k. But maybe you want to do more than that. So here's where it could make sense to convert even when you're in your income earning years. First, you could do small conversions. So let's say you have $8,000 or $10,000 left in a tax bracket that's acceptable to you. Well, you could just convert a few $1,000s each year. That won't make a huge difference, but if you do that for enough years, you might end up with a nice chunk of change that can come in handy later. Like if you need to replace a roof in retirement or buy a new car, you could pull those funds out of Roth without getting bumped up into higher tax brackets or paying more for Medicare, for example. There might also be times when you're still working and your income is relatively low. Maybe you change jobs and there's a period when you're not earning income, so you don't have a full year's worth of income. Maybe you take a sabbatical. Or maybe you just do this in the year you retire. If you retire in April or May, you've only got a couple of months of income, and there might be more room to do some conversions at good rates. So the idea here is going to be to fill up acceptable tax brackets and not just assume that you shouldn't do Roth conversions just because you haven't retired yet. Next, we have that early retirement phase before age 63. This is the sweet spot for doing Roth conversions for most people. You have no earned income, and you might have a lot of control over how much taxable income you're going to take. Yes, you might have interest from bank accounts, dividends and capital gains from taxable brokerage accounts, but to a large extent, you can decide how much income you take. Plus, before age 63, you don't need to worry about those Medicare surcharges or IRMAA just yet. So if you wanted to go big, these might be the years to do that. And we'll assume you haven't taken Social Security retirement income yet, which makes this even more appealing. At this stage, you might want to fill that 12% bracket with income, maybe the 22, maybe even the 24%. The higher you get, the more you want to be really careful and run some numbers and discuss this. So this isn't individualized tax advice, just what most people would consider tax rates for conversions. You have a golden window here in which you can shrink those pre-tax balances, which should help you reduce your RMDs later in life. And remember that those RMDs create forced income, which can put you into higher tax brackets. It might cause more of your Social Security to be taxed. It could cause you to pay more each month for Medicare, and it can cause other issues on your tax return. A lot of people actually underestimate the impact of those RMDs, or they just don't know what kind of an issue it might be. Now, it might not be an issue for you, so it's a good idea to run some numbers. There are a lot of ways you can do that, but I've actually got a calculator on my website where you can enter some information about your own situation, and it'll calculate your RMDs, and you can even throw in some potential Roth conversion strategies here. So with a conversion as the blue line, you might have less in those pre-tax or traditional IRA accounts. And then what might your RMDs look like, again, with and without some conversions? These are the types of things you want to look at ahead of time so that you don't get caught by surprise. Next, we have the phase where maybe you need to worry about IRMAA, but you still have not taken your Social Security benefits yet. And this is still possibly an appealing place to do some conversions. It's important to know that when you claim Social Security could affect your Roth conversion strategy. Now, your timing decision should really be based on a number of factors, but for now, we'll just focus on somebody who might be concerned about big RMDs later in life and they're thinking about tax planning. And the takeaway is that if you delay Social Security, you have more years in which you can convert at potentially lower rates than if you take Social Security early. Once you claim Social Security, up to 85% of it could be included in your taxable income. And for the type of people who are usually worried about big RMDs and doing tax planning, it's a pretty good chance that that's going to be the case for you. Typically, that means you have some significant assets, maybe a lot of money in those pre-tax retirement accounts. And by delaying your Social Security, you not only have more room to do those tax strategies, but you also get a bigger Social Security payment later. And remember that at least 15% of that payment will be tax-free, so there's another tax benefit that you potentially get if you delay. I've got other videos on that topic, and you do want to be mindful of what they call the tax torpedo, meaning that as you add income, possibly through conversions, then you're having more and more of your Social Security brought into your taxable income. And that might just be something that you have to face if you are pursuing these strategies. And for a lot of people, given their income, they just end up being beyond that zone anyway, where they're just going to have 85% of their income included pretty much throughout life. Now, there might be plenty of good reasons to take Social Security early. So this doesn't mean everybody should delay. It's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're thinking about these tax strategies. Next, we have the period after you start Social Security. So is the party over? No, not necessarily. But the math does change. It's kind of like when you used to live by yourself, but then a roommate comes in and is taking up that spare bedroom and taking up space in the kitchen. That's kind of what Social Security can do on your tax return. You can still have some friends over or do Roth conversions in this weak analogy, but there isn't as much room. What's going to happen is that Social Security income is just going to take up space in those lowest tax brackets. It's going to be hard to stay in the most favorable brackets. And then you might also have a hard time staying below those IRMAA thresholds if that's a concern for you. But it still could make sense to do conversions, even with that Social Security getting in the way. Again, by doing those, you might be able to reduce those future RMDs. Maybe you're planning for a survivor, the so-called widow's tax trap. So when somebody becomes a single tax filer, then the brackets compress and they can more easily find themselves in high income tax brackets and easier to go over those IRMAA cliffs. And you might be doing this for the next generation. So having Roth money is a lot easier for your heirs than having pre-tax money. But you really want to run the numbers and make sure it makes sense for everybody. Next, we have those pre and post RMD years. Now, before RMDs begin, this is your final chance to shape the size of those mandatory distributions. You're going to be thinking about the same strategies as before, pay some tax at whatever rates or costs are acceptable to you, but you have a lot less room to maneuver. And after RMDs begin, it could still make sense to do conversions. Think back to when we were talking about your working years. Maybe there's a little bit of room in a tax bracket and you want to go ahead and fill that up, or make some tax-free money for yourself or your heirs. And remember that you cannot convert your RMD. You must take your RMD, and then on top of that, you can do some conversion. But the RMD has to come out, go into a taxable account or your bank account or something like that. You can't just directly convert it. So if you want to slow your future RMD growth, it might make sense to keep on converting throughout life. Just remember, it can be hard to catch up with that train that's kind of running away, but you can make a nice little dent by setting aside some money that will potentially be tax-free later for somebody. If you want some ideas on exactly how much to convert each year, the video popping up right now should help with that. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to talking with you soon.